Brad Dempsey was born in the early 1990s in Dublin, Ireland, into a world of crime, violence, and intrigue. His father, Fat Freddie Thompson, was one of the most infamous and feared figures in the Irish underworld, a criminal mastermind with a reputation that stretched across Dublin and beyond. As a son of such a notorious figure, Brad was exposed to the world of organized crime from a very young age, whether he was aware of it or not. His mother, Vicky Dempsey, would later testify that she feared for her son's future, knowing that his upbringing would be shaped by the dangerous world around him. Dublin itself during the 1990s was rife with gang violence and drug dealing, and many children in the city were influenced by the chaos around them. For Brad, the line between right and wrong was often blurred, and his early years would soon see him pulled into a world of crime that would define his life. As a child, Brad's life wasn't like that of most kids. He was thrust into the world of criminality due to his father's lifestyle. While most children were playing games and attending school, Brad's formative years were spent in the shadows of his father's violent empire. His father, Freddie Thompson, was a leader in Dublin's criminal underworld, heavily involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and a series of violent murders. As Brad grew older, he witnessed his father's influence in Dublin and understood that this life, however dangerous, was one that his family was entrenched in. At the age of just 9 years old, Brad's criminal exposure took a shocking turn. He was reportedly used by the notorious Kinahan cartel, a gang linked to his father's operation, to smuggle a significant sum of money. According to reports, he was used as a drug cash mule to carry €5,000 through Malaga airport in Spain. It's unclear how much Brad understood of the situation, but his involvement marked a disturbing initiation into the criminal world at a very young age. His early exposure to illegal activities would prove to have a lasting impact on Brad, shaping the trajectory of his life. His mother, while acknowledging that Brad was influenced by his father's actions, expressed her deep guilt and sorrow for the choices that led her son down this dangerous path. As Brad entered his teenage years, the influence of his father and the criminal lifestyle became more apparent. Freddie Thompson, known for his ruthlessness and dominance in the Irish underworld, continued to be a figure of power, and Brad couldn't escape his father's legacy. The young Dempsey had been exposed to criminal activities at a young age, and his proximity to such violence and criminality would come to shape his worldview. While Brad was still in his early teens, his father's criminal activities were getting more complicated and violent. Thompson's criminal empire had expanded beyond just drug trafficking into extortion, money laundering, and eventually, involvement in organized crime syndicates across Europe. Freddie's ties to violent gangs and his role as a key figure in the Dublin criminal scene made him a target for law enforcement, but also a respected and feared figure within the criminal community. At the age of 17, Brad was seen at several criminal events, further cementing his involvement in his father's criminal network. While it's unclear whether Brad was directly involved in any illegal activities at this point, it was apparent that he was moving in the same circles as his father. His actions and associations began to signal that he was being groomed to take on a larger role in the family business. As the years passed, the grip of law enforcement on Freddie Thompson's criminal empire grew tighter. In 2005, Thompson was arrested for the murder of David Douglas, a prominent figure in the criminal world, leading to a lengthy trial. Freddie Thompson was later sentenced to life imprisonment for his involvement in the murder. While his father was behind bars, Brad's life continued to unfold in the shadow of his father's arrest. His criminal activities, however, were just beginning to take shape. The void left by his father's incarceration saw Brad become more involved in the Dublin criminal scene. It's not clear whether he was fully in charge of the operations during this period, or merely a figurehead in the background, but his name began circulating more frequently in association with his father's former associates. As Brad Dempsey grew older, his name became synonymous with violence and criminality. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had gained a reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable figure. While his father had been a criminal mastermind who used his intellect and strategic mind, Brad was more volatile and willing to engage in violent confrontations. His reputation as a ruthless enforcer started to spread, especially in the context of gang rivalries that were increasingly erupting in Dublin. In 2017, Brad Dempsey was arrested for his involvement in a violent shooting incident. It was just one of several acts of aggression that Brad was accused of carrying out, and it served to further solidify his role in his father's criminal activities. In a shocking turn of events, it was reported that Brad had taken part in a series of shootouts and confrontations between rival factions in the Dublin criminal world. It was clear that he was not only continuing his father's legacy, but also establishing his own reputation as a ruthless figure in the city. By 2022, Brad Dempsey had reached a critical point in his criminal career. In January of that year, he was arrested in connection with a shooting incident that occurred on Margaret Kennedy Road in Dublin 8. During the shooting, Brad fired 5 shots into a car occupied by 4 individuals. The shooting was part of a larger escalation in the gangland violence that had taken hold of Dublin, and it was seen as another violent act in a long line of similar crimes committed by members of the criminal underworld. Brad Dempsey was later convicted of possession of a firearm and other related charges, and in 2023, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. His sentence, while significant, did little to reduce his prominence in the criminal world. During his time in Mountjoy Prison, Dempsey was known for causing problems with other inmates, and he was kept in isolation for his own safety due to the nature of his criminal background. During his time in prison, the possibility of a reunion between Brad Dempsey and his father, Freddie Thompson, was discussed. However, prison staff expressed significant concerns about the risks of such a meeting. Given the high-profile nature of both individuals and the violent reputations they held, any attempt for a father-son reunion would have posed serious security risks. Both Freddie and Brad were seen as high-value targets within the prison system, and staff were highly cautious about any interaction between them. Despite their shared history and criminal ties, the likelihood of a reunion between father and son remained slim, with both individuals seemingly operating in separate spheres of the criminal world. Freddie Thompson, serving a life sentence for the murder of David Douglas, continued to serve time in Portlaoise prison. Meanwhile, Brad Dempsey's life in Mountjoy Prison remained clouded by further violent outbursts and clashes with other inmates. Brad Dempsey's life, much like his father's, has been defined by crime and violence. Growing up in a household where criminality was the norm, Brad's exposure to the underworld was inevitable. From a young age, he was thrust into a dangerous world, and his actions as an adult mirrored the path his father had carved before him. However, it's clear that Brad has his own violent streak, and that he is willing to use force to protect his interests. As a young man, Brad had the world at his feet, but his potential was overshadowed by the criminal influences that surrounded him. The tragic story of Brad Dempsey is one of opportunity lost, and a life wasted on violence and criminality. As of now, Brad Dempsey remains incarcerated in Mountjoy Prison, Dublin, serving his sentence for the 2022 shooting incident. The future for Brad remains uncertain. His violent tendencies, coupled with his criminal family ties, make his rehabilitation unlikely. However, his life behind bars is not entirely devoid of drama, as his time in prison has been marked by numerous altercations with fellow inmates. The likelihood of his continued involvement in the criminal world remains high once he eventually serves his sentence, and whether he will ever be able to break free from his father's legacy is a question that remains unanswered. The story of Brad Dempsey serves as a stark reminder of how a criminal legacy can shape the lives of those born into it. From a young boy involved in illegal activities to a violent enforcer in Dublin's criminal world, Brad has walked the same path as his father. Whether he will be able to escape this path and forge a new future remains to be seen. But for now, he remains another product of Ireland's deeply entrenched criminal culture. That is it for our video today. Like and subscribe and comment below what you think of Brad Dempsey, and I will see you on the next video.